What's cracking, everybody? XehrFelrose here, bringing you some Pokemon GO Battle League content. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Fantasy Cup coming in today at the League rotation. Going to be a great League Fantasy Cup this time, as we've had the Ultra League Fantasy Cup a couple of times. Now we get it in the Great League, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not thrilled. This meta looks very condensed, and I don't know. We'll talk about it, right? So, as usual, we're going to go through some of the more important picks in this meta, and then we'll take a look at 5 teams that I think are going to do really well in this rotation. So, obviously, we take a look at this meta, and the first thing you're going to see, Registeel, Stunfisk, Isumer, Tapu Fini, and that's pretty much your meta, right? Like, I'm going to be honest, the cohesive teams that do the best are probably going to end up being some semblance of like Isumer double Steel or Steel double Water Fairy, right? They're going to have Tapu Fini and Isumer, and it's going to be some form of that ABB nonsense, right? Because Steel and Water Fairy are the best cores in this meta. And yes, there are definitely some things that may make a slight exception to that, but for the most part, like, the Isumer and Tapu Fini and Registeel, like just them by themselves, are so dominant that nothing really beats them both, right? We don't really have anything that's able to beat them both, but we have a lot of things in this meta that have some play into each other, and that's what we're going to focus on. So the first team that we're going to take a look at here is going to be the Isumer double Steel. Now, I originally wanted to put a Alolan Sandslash in the back here, but I think that Escavalier probably has more play than the Alolan Sandslash in the back, and it's less susceptible to being just completely slapped, right? Like, obviously, yeah, you know, if there's a Skarmory in the back, then the Sandslash would have a better time. So you can put Sandslash in over the Escav, is basically what I'm trying to say here. But Registeel is typically going to be your safe swap, as with most things, Registeel can just dominantly get shield advantage from whenever it wants. And then you've got Isumer or Tapu Fini on the lead to handle those other things that, you know, beat the steals. So really easy team to really look at here. It's basically, you know, got coverage against the entire meta. This team is essentially, with Escavalier, everything in this team can beat something in this meta. You have answers on the teams, everything. It's just going to depend on alignment at that point. So, excuse me. Let's take a look at the second team, which is essentially going to be Alolan Sandslash double Water, right? Like I was saying, Steel double Water is going to be a thing. And I think Alolan Sandslash and Escavalier are probably the two best poised things to really fill that Steel role. You could certainly use Registeel. Absolutely you could. But I feel like because Alolan Sandslash in the 2 shield beats Registeel, and Registeel has such a strong matchup with Zap Cannon against both the waters, I feel like having a Steel in the lead that can beat Registeel is much more preferred than just slapping Registeel up there. But your mileage may vary. You can use whichever Steel you want. They're really interchangeable anyway. But this team, very strong, very good letter scores, as we've, you know, I've been asked to try and linger on these for a minute, so I'm going to try to make sure that y'all get the chance to see. But just a reminder, the letter coverages don't always mean much. It's really going to mean more for when you play like a Show 6 team. It's in Go Battle League. Unless you're in a limited meta like this, you're almost never going to get straight A's unless you really go off the rocker to get to it. But this team really, in the ones, loses to Registeel, right? Because you can't take out a Registeel with Alolan Sandslash without a second shield. But Registeel is really the only thing. Skarmory also, interesting thing about Skarmory, in the 2 shields, Skarmory can actually fully farm down an Alolan Sandslash Shadow without even throwing a charge move. And it also, I believe, wins the wins the ones, but loses the zeros, and the non-shadow Alolan Sandslash flips it, loses the 2s, but wins the 1, or wins the zeros and the 1s, I think. It's weird. The Skarmory Alolan Sandslash, because of Steel Wing, got really weird. Magnezone also kind of slaps this whole team, but only because I assume that the Magnezone lands a wild charge against the Alolan Sandslash, takes it out. But otherwise, really strong team, has a lot of coverage on the meta, and honestly, I believe that all 3 of those steals and the 2 shields are going to be much better for the Sandslash. And honestly, you could probably finesse the Skarmory if you needed to, because it doesn't really dominate Tapu Fini and Isumer. It just happens to win, probably by landing a Brave Bird. So let's take a look at another team here. getting off the beaten path a little bit. You're going to see like Azumarill, Tapu Fini, and Registeel kind of snuck in on all these teams for the most part. Because the meta is, again, it's so dense and small that you really can't meld a team together without one of those three on it. It just, they're so dominant in this meta that you basically have to have at least one. But Turtonator looking like a really strong pick here to be able to beat the Steels, all of them, pretty much all of the Steels. And most of the dragons, I don't think are really going to be all that. They're not going to be really involved here because of the fact that Azumarill and Tapu Fini are just so dominant, right? But you have Registeel and Azumarill in the back. Turtonator really only worries about the water fairies, honestly, and other fairies too for the most part. But it has that Incinerate, and it also has access to Flamethrower, Flash Cannon, Dragon Pulse, Overheat. It's got a decent moveset, but it's all nukes, right? Incinerate gets you there pretty quick, and the only thing you're really worried about is Azumarill, Tapu Fini. So we put Registeel on this team as an answer to the Azumarill and Tapu Fini, and Azumarill itself is a good core mate to Turtonator, and also is able to just be a nice, safe thing to have on your team. So team is not exactly going to do so well in safety because, again, this, I mean, it's a balanced team. It looks kind of RPS, right? If you lose lead, you might lose swap. You might have a problem. It just becomes a mess at some point. But overall, the team itself, super strong, and I think this is going to be the best Turtonator team that I've seen. Everything has play here, right? All X's along this entire thing. The team has really good, strong coverage against the meta in general, and I realized that my window for my recording software is maybe not showing everything, so I'm going to be more mindful about that for the next couple of teams. But you can go plug these in PV Poke and check them out yourself as well, though, if you missed any of the tables or anything. But anyway, yeah. So Turtonator is going to be an interesting pick if you have one. You can use one that you rated. They come in at under 1,500, but they're harder to get. Or you could use a traded one, which is, you know, in like anything else. So getting into team number 4 here. So this team is going to be a Skarmory team. And now, what we've basically got is Skarmory has a lot of play against a lot of the meta with Steel Wing. It does take wins against, like we said, the water fairies. It really just doesn't like steel types. So what we've got is we've got 2 ground types in the meta. A Galarian Stunfisk on the safe swap and a Shadow Flygon. I don't have Shadow Flygon, so I would have to run regular with this team. But with Scorching Sands now, Flygon has really consistent, quick ground type damage, and that Dragon Claw is good neutral coverage into anything that's not a steel type or a fairy type. So this team has really good coverage on the meta. Not as bulky because Flygon honestly brings that bulk rating down quite a bit. And it's a pretty good team. I mean, it looks like a good team. Like, I might actually consider running this team. You do have to be careful though, right? Like, if you do meet an Azumarill, you have to put it into a point where Skarmory can realistically like farm it down, or not have to get to, like, if an Azumarill comes and counter swaps on the Stunfisk and leaves with too much HP, then you might, the Azumarill might get out of control. So you got to manage yourself very well with these ground types, because you're going to lure out the Azumarill or Tapu Fini with the G-Fisk, and then use Skarmory to get rid of it, and hopefully Flygon can sweep in the back. Maybe they got a Registeel or something, right? That's the hope with this type of team, is you're baiting it out. They're hard fairy water type with the G-Fisk, and then you're hoping that Flygon sweeps. Now, Turtonator would make this a very, very difficult task because it kind of roasts Skarmory, and G-Fisk doesn't appreciate the fire type damage either. But G-Fisk can very realistically outpace if you get a bait off with a Rock Slide or something. But Flygon does have a very good matchup into Turtonator, so there's that. But as far as threats goes, again, another team. Everything in this on this team has play against the meta, has a way to win against everything. I'm not sure how Skarmory actually beats Excadrill. That is actually the first time I've ever seen that, and that is mental. Oh my goodness. How does Excadrill? You know what? It's probably because it's so squishy. Excadrill is like one of those things that's really cool in concept, but in the Great League, it's just so squishy, you're probably not going to get much out of it. But this team, again, this is another one of those teams where I think it's going to be really, really strong in the right meta, right? You don't have to play Skarmory necessarily. You could play really any other thing that doesn't like steel types, or if you really want to, you could even, I would say even Ferrothorn honestly wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to play with this team, because then you're going to really have a hard answer against the water fairies. But let's take a look at the last team here on the list before we wrap this one up. We're taking a look at another G-Fisk team. I know, but the reason why I put this up here was because of Slurpuff. Slurpuff has access to Flamethrower and Energy Ball, and that means that it has ways to really threaten not only the Steel types, but also the Water Fairy types. And I feel like Slurpuff is going to be a very, very good sleeper pick, good safe swap, right? You hit a bad lead, well, I go to Slurpuff. All right, they bring in a Azumarill, hit him with those energy balls. I will bet you that Slurpuff has an opportunity to get wins against the Azumarill. Look, there it is. It wins against the Azumarill. It somehow loses against Tapu Fini, but let's investigate that for just a moment. Because, yeah, Tapu Fini loses the 2 shields. So if they counter swap a Tapu Fini on you, you can beat them in the 2 shields with those energy balls. Energy ball not going to do, obviously, a ton of damage. You do have to land 2, technically, I believe, to win that matchup. But, I mean, you have ways to win, and that's what really matters, especially on the safe swap. You can really do damage to anything with Slurpuff in this meta. And so that by itself gets Slurpuff to be, honestly, one of my top picks in this meta. It doesn't necessarily have amazing wins in the 1s, or the 0s, but I bet you, dude, in the 2s against something like, let's take a look at Registeel too. In the 2s, okay, it still loses. I look like a fool right now, but I tell you what, if you tell me that 3 turns of difference can flip that scenario, basically meaning that, look at how close the Slurpuff is to the Flamethrower. You tell me that I only need an extra 2 fast moves, which is very likely to happen on a safe swap, especially if you safe swap in against something that has a longer fast move. You immediately get those 2 fairy wins. You can beat Registeel. There it is, right there, in front of you to see it. That's how cool this thing is. So Slurpuff, if you got one, really highly recommended as an attempt to play this out. All the top things, and literally, I think everything in this meta. Slurpuff. So I was like not sure about Slurpuff at first, and now the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, I gotta run Slurpuff. It's honestly, it's gonna, if it doesn't win Switch, it's gonna get you both shields. Basically, that's what Slurpuff is gonna be good for. So maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be with the G-Fisk Tapu Fini core, but you could really put this with just about anything, and you can use it as a safe swap, or you can use it as whatever you want. Maybe with shield advantage, it does well. We could actually take a look at that. You've never seen this before. This is it. All right, so we're gonna do a multi-battle in the, in the Great League, because I can't pick that yet. We're gonna pick Slurpuff, okay? So Slurpuff with Fairy Wind, Energy Ball, because I don't like Charm. It's awful. We're gonna look at the Fantasy Cup meta, and we're gonna take a look at the 2-to-1 shield scenario for Slurpuff. 17-3. It wins against everything in the 2-to-1 shields that's not Skarmory, Bastiodon, and Turtonator. That is insane. Okay? With a shield advantage, it beats, and I know this isn't the entire meta, right? We could even change that. You want to go back and look, you can see all Pokemon. And I'm giving you just a quick tutorial on how to use this stuff. Okay? 29 losses, and most of them are going to be stuff that you're not going to see. Shadow Charmers, yeah, good luck in a Steel meta. Bastiodon, obviously we knew about that one. Most of these are like Steel types that resist the fire, right? You know, and most of the other ones are going to be fairies that don't really care about the damage that's being given them because it's all neutral. But, you know, Skarmory being the only thing here that I'm seeing, and that's probably because it lands a Brave Bird. So, basically, what I'm saying here is that Slurpuff is legit. Don't sleep on it. That's going to do it for me for today, folks. I appreciate y'all hanging out in this video if you're still here. If you want, excuse me, good, that COVID cough is killing me, dude. Ooh, if you're still here and you want to check out the link in the descriptions for the Patreon and the YouTube membership, you can actually get early access to these meta guides that I write out in my Discord before every rotation. You get them early before they get to YouTube. I usually do them on like Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe even earlier if I know about it ahead of time. Also, early access to teams, so whatever team I run that's slapping and Go Battle League, also all the community, all the teams that they're running, it's a wonderful server to be in. I really recommend it. If it wasn't my server, I would spend the money to be in it. That's how good I think it is. Anyway, also, if you're looking for coaching, there's a link in the description to Metafy. I'm going to take it out there. Thank you all so much. Good luck in the Fantasy Cup if you're playing it, or in the Master League if you're playing that as well. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.